Welcome to tonight's video on Unit 9, Part 2, Simplifying Trigonometric Expressions and Trigonometric Proofs. So remember the goals as listed here when you're doing these. First of all, simplifying the expressions, you just want to make it as simple as you can. Remember also everything can be rewritten in terms of sine and cosine. So for example, this is cosine x plus sine x times sine x over cosine x. Cosine x plus sine squared over cosine x. Now, in order to combine fractions, you need a common denominator. So you would have to multiply by cosine here. So you get cosine squared plus sine squared over cosine. And cosine squared plus sine squared is 1 over cosine, and that is equal to the secant. So the second one, notice you have a sine squared plus a cosine squared, so that is 1. And then 1 plus tangent squared, that is secant squared. And secant squared over secant reduces to secant. All right, the last one, they want you to factor. And when you factor and there's two different trig functions, you need to substitute in for one of the functions. So for example, cosine squared, that is 1 minus sine squared. And then you distribute the negative. Combine like terms. And then factor. So you get sine x minus 3, sine x plus 1. All right, so now on to trigonometric proofs. And notice the rules. Remember, we start with one side of the equation, rewrite it, and then substitute in algebraically and simplify until we get the other side. And here are some things that you can do. Remember, split one fraction into two fractions means if you have a plus b over c, that is a over c plus b over c. Multiplying by the conjugate means if you have like sine x minus cosine x, the conjugate, remember, is sine x plus cosine x. Those are conjugates. So if you look at the first one, number 4, the first thing I would do is to pick the left-hand side to work with. So that means I'm going to do secant theta minus 1 over 1 minus cosine theta. I'll change it in terms of cosine. So it's 1 over cosine minus 1 over 1 minus cosine. And then getting a common denominator here would give me 1 minus cosine theta over cosine theta, because I got to get cosine top and bottom there, over 1 minus cosine theta. Remember, when you divide fractions, you multiply by the reciprocal, and it might be a good idea on a scratch piece of paper to do like the computation, like 1 minus cosine theta over cosine times 1 over 1 minus cosine, and then you can cross out. So that gives you 1 over cosine theta, and I'm going to erase that because I'm going to need that space for the next problem, and that's equal to the secant theta. All right, for number 5, because it's one fraction equals another, this is where I would look to use the conjugate. It doesn't matter left or right. I'm going to choose the left to multiply by the conjugate, which is 1 plus sine t. So it's equal to cosine t times 1 plus sine t over 1 minus sine squared t. And that is cosine t times 1 plus sine t over cosine squared t. And then notice you can cancel. So it becomes 1 plus sine t over cosine t. And there you go. All right, number 6. I'll work with the left-hand side. And I'm going to change everything in terms of sine and cosine. So you have sine over cosine over 1 minus cosine over sine plus cosine over sine over 1 minus sine over cosine. So then that means when I get a common denominator here, both the numerator, or sorry, common denominator for the denominator, it's sine over cosine over over sine minus cosine all over sine plus cosine over sine over cosine minus sine over cosine. Then I would actually do the division, and this is where you divide, where you multiply by the reciprocal. When you do that, you get sine squared over cosine x times sine x minus cosine x plus, and I'll just show you an example here. I just do the work on the side. So you would get cosine squared over sine x times cosine x minus sine x. Now, you're thinking, well, I have sine squared plus cosine squared. That's awesome. The only problem is the denominator is not the same. Notice these are opposites, so you're going to have to multiply one of them by negative. And also, this side you need a sine, this side you need a cosine. So if I multiply this side by sine, I get sine to the third. And then I'm going to have sine x cosine x times sine x minus cosine x as my common denominator. And here I need to multiply by negative cosine. Now I have a common denominator. So now I can factor this. It's a difference of 2 cubes. It's sine x minus cosine x times sine squared x plus sine x cosine x plus cosine squared all over sine x cosine x times sine x minus cosine x. Notice you can cancel here. And also sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. So you have 1 plus sine x cosine x over sine x cosine x. And you can split that into 2 fractions. That's 1 over sine x cosine x plus sine x over cosine x over sine x cosine x. So that gives you cosecant x secant x plus 1. And that's what you're trying to get. All right. So number 7, we're going to have to do a little workout here since I used some of that space. I'll erase this part. So I'll use the left-hand side. So it's 1 plus sine theta over cosine theta plus cosine theta over 1 plus sine theta. So it's equal to, now I got to get common denominator. So I got 1 plus sine theta squared plus cosine squared all over cosine theta 1 plus sine theta when you get a common denominator. 1 plus 2 sine theta plus sine squared theta when you multiply it out, plus cosine squared theta all over cosine theta times 1 plus sine theta. And sine squared plus cosine squared is 1, plus 1 is 2. And then 2 is factored out. And then notice you get 2 over cosine, which is 2 secant. All right, that concludes our video for this unit, for this part, and I will see you guys on Zoom. Have a good rest of your day.